Brought to you by JMR Rentals, professional digital cinema and broadcast equipment rentals in Brooklyn, New York. JMRNY.com. Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend. I'm Jason Godbey, and joining me via Zoom today, you know him from his numerous television and film roles, including The Blacklist, Couple of Guys, and Slapface, Mr. Lukas Hassel. Welcome, Lukas.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here, and well done for saying my name correctly.
Thanks, man. It's great to have you. We were saying before we rolled, you've been mentioned on the show a couple of times. Both Deborah Markowitz mentioned you recently, and then even more recently than that, Jeremiah Kipp talked to us when he was talking about Slapface about you, and that I think is a really interesting thing to talk about. So I want to talk about that with you.
Sure.
But first, I want to talk to you about you. So, how did you get started with filmmaking and acting? What is your origin story?
Well, I guess my origin story is I had a very, like many of us, creative elementary school teacher who was into theater, putting on pieces with all the kids, and we played multiple parts. So ever since I was a kid, I had an interest in sort of the creative side of things. And when I was finishing high school, there was a well-known writer in Denmark, where I'm from, who happened to come see our high school play and came backstage and said, I think you should think about maybe taking acting seriously. And up until that point, I really hadn't. But started taking some private lessons while I was finishing high school. And after my senior year, I applied to get into Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland, who had a very good sort of theater school. Flew over to audition and got in. Didn't dare turn it down in case I was never going to be accepted to another theater school anywhere else. So 4 months later, I ended up living in Ireland for 8 years doing theater after my degree. And then I moved to New York in '96 to pursue more sort of film and TV.
We talked a little bit about you with Couple of Guys, which is an interesting television project. I know that you were also on the Blacklist recently. And then Jeremiah mentioned you with Slapface. And I just thought it was interesting because you're like the monster in Slapface.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's like a tall, handsome guy, but he wanted to play the monster. So I wanted to kind of talk to you about those two parts. Let's talk about Slapface first. How did you kind of approach that role? I know that he started early with you, like you started reading the script with him and stuff.
Sort of to just go back to what you mentioned at the top, where I'm in sort of, a TV series developed by Deborah, and then I'm in The Blacklist on network TV, and then I'm in Slapface, this indie feature with Jeremiah Kipp. I mean, as an actor, we're always just looking for the most interesting, most layered roles, right? And so different things have different pros and cons. I'm always looking for people who are passionate about their projects. And so routes take a different way in this business. Working with someone like Jeremiah is just an incredible gift for an actor like me, because once you establish a relationship with someone as prolific and as talented as he is, he uses you again and again. We have a great working relationship. I was in an early short film of his. I was in a feature that he was an AD on, actually, and that's how we sort of really started to forge a connection. And then I was in on the early readings of Slapface and the various iterations that it had, because we're both in the same writing group. We both would bring in screenplays where you listen to each other's, words on the script, and you get notes and feedback. And so I was in early on with his various pieces of work. And at the early reading, I remember he asked me to read the monster character. I was reading the narrations because the monster doesn't speak. So I'm reading the narrations, and I just got a sense for this character. I'm always cast as like, the villain, as it turns out, a lot, but a lot of it is based on the appearance that I have, for good or for bad. And in this case, I thought how interesting it would be to play a character where I would have a different exterior to what I'm used to, and then figure out what would someone like that, what would dictate how someone like that behaved. In this case, it was very different to my own life. So I was very thrilled that he kept it in mind. So when he got the funding for the short, he offered me the part as the female monster. And that's a real challenge to get into that mindset. I loved it.
What was it about playing that sort of hidden nonverbal, because I mean, no offense, but actors like to talk a lot usually. Like,
Yeah. Point in
most,
hand, my
yeah.
last segment, right?
So like, what was it kind of about that in terms of playing that role that, wasn't going to show your face and you weren't going to talk? Like, was that something that you kind of hadn't done before and you thought,
Yeah, I'd done sort of roles with some CGI makeup before, but it was basically the complexities of a character that doesn't speak, I think was a challenge to get across the screen without emoting or without sign language, right? It was a matter of figuring out how can you convey things very subtly and yet succinctly. Uh, in the short film, my CGI makeup was a little stiffer, so I would say I couldn't do as much. So one of the things I talked with Jeremiah about for the feature was to make it more sort of latex based, more so basically so I could use my face more. So I had a few more options, and that's exactly what happened. But then with someone like Jeremiah, who's a real actress director, you sort of get to dive into the layers and you figure out where are the points where this character hits obstacles that can really change the trajectory of how this character moves forward. And so you bite into those moments, and it's delicious to figure out how do I show a lot with a little.
I imagine for something like Couple of Guys, it's complete opposite.
Yes, exactly. A couple of guys was something completely different. It was basically a situation where Deborah came to me with a role of basically two guys that get second chances very late in life. So it's about sexuality reaching an acceptance to one's sexuality. In this case, the other gentleman in the piece, played by Sal Randino, comes out very late in life. He's been married, he's had kids, been married to a woman, and then discovers his homosexual real identity. I play a character who's known all my life, but sort of at a stage in life where I thought, love is over. I'm not going to meet anybody else. It's fine. I'll go out and grind her occasionally and get what I need, but love is done. And then these two guys meet, and a couple of guys, as it's called, and we have a second chance at love in life. And so I just think it's a really beautiful, different take on sort of mature love, which we don't see a lot of. You have a lot of coming of ages of sort of teenagers finding themselves, but someone finding himself later on in life is really quite beautiful and rare. We see that on screen.
I know that Deborah had some consultants and things like that for that piece. I mean, was that like something you had to research, or did
No.
you?
So I'm a gay actor myself, right? So I was very happy to come on board to sort of be the gay voice in this particular piece. So I have a credit on the script as script consultant because I felt I could add some authenticity to language and try to get rid of stereotypes in there, or try to get rid of things that I felt just wasn't quite appropriate for our community. Not that Deborah is an amazing writer. I could just add a little bit more depth to some of those things. And so I think where we ended up is just a beautiful, clear love story between two men.
I was actually just talking about this with somebody the other day, and it's very rare. Like I remember I read someplace and it really kind of rang home with me. There was this thing about straight actors playing gay, and they called it like a subliminal wink that they did to the audience to kind of let the audience know that, I'm just playing this.
Mm.
And I remember when I saw Hugh Jackman in Boy from Oz, and I was like, "Oh my God, Wolverine's gay!" Like, it just kind of like, I mean, he was so good in that part because there wasn't that, and I didn't realize that's what it was.
Right.
So, I mean, have you encountered that? And like, how do you kind of, if you're playing with somebody, and you're, is that something that you can help them overcome, or is that something you've seen kind of thing?
Well, it's a very interesting topic. I mean, I remember recently there was a lot of ado about Benedict Cumberbatch playing a potentially homosexual cowboy on The Power of the Dog, and just today there's all this news about Sam Elliott saying that the Western is nonsense because it's full of homosexual innuendos. So, whatever, Sam Elliott, I'm telling you. But I remember Benedict Cumberbatch saying in an interview that last he checked, you don't have access to anybody's sort of mind and personal thoughts, right? So he didn't distinctly come out and say that he had homosexual thoughts whenever, whatever, but like, why would he have to declare that? He's living a straight lifestyle, but I guess all of us have colors in all kinds of ways, right? So I totally buy into that although he identifies as straight, who knows where his thoughts wander from time to time. So, whether that makes him 97% straight, he can still tap into what love means to him and so forth. So I don't particularly buy into this model of, well, I wouldn't have a job if I did, a sort of playing your sexuality. You can only pick characters that do that, because 99% of my characters are straight, supposedly, right? This is actually the first sort of gay character I've been cast in, oddly enough. So, I think when a story is all about falling in love, I don't think there's anything more universal than that. And why would someone, just because of the sex part of it, not understand how that feels? So, I think there's a lot to be said for pushing the boundaries towards sort of political correctness and to make sure everyone is being heard. And in this case, I just think it's important to remember that love is love, regardless of what your sexuality is. So I wouldn't take issue with that, as long as they avoid sort of stereotypes in the writing. Then I think it's great.
I've been very kind of cautious about this thing where, only this type of person can play this type of part. And, I mean, like, listen, I know where you're coming from, but it's called acting, man. Like,
Exactly.
this is what actors do. This is what they get paid to do, and this is what they study. And why
Right.
would you just want to play you all the time? Like, it's that kind of moment that makes you want to, bang your head against the wall. But
Right. Well, it undermines the skill set that we're meant to have, which is our skill set is to put ourselves into other people's situations. I would play a serial killer gladly. I played a killer on the Blacklist on TV, and I'm not a killer by day or by night. And I can put my mind into that space, right? So exactly where is the line? I mean, I absolutely respect, particularly for, say, the trans community being underrepresented and so forth, or the African-American community being underrepresented. So I'm very happy there's a lot of light in those areas, and I feel we need to respect those. And then there are the flip side of trying to hold on to what we do as actors, and that is to play characters written for us.
yeah, it can be a bit of a fine line, especially when Twitter's involved. But the other thing I think that's interesting about you in particular is that you've done, like we said, you did like a network TV show,
Sure.
and I can't think of anything. It's sort of like corporate television, almost like big network, and you're on. It's sort of old school TV. And there's a system that works
Right.
through the system in the writing. It's almost like a paramilitary
Sure.
structure, you know.
Absolutely.
But then you've also done these like an indie series and an indie film.
Right.
And I always ask people, what was the difference in experience for you going
Mhm.
from a day of work on the Blacklist as opposed to a small series like Couple of Guys or Slapface.
Well, it's kind of, the best of both worlds is to be able to work in both. That's what we would all like. I mean, I think there's something incredibly beautiful about working on a show like The Blacklist on NBC, because you work with top professionals in the business. Everything is well considered. Everything is double, triple checked. And so when you get on set, it's just a beautiful machine that's running on a well-oiled track. Whereas in indie, sometimes that's not the case. It's not a well-oiled track, but it is probably a more collaborative scenario. I explained it to a friend of mine the other day as, like, if you imagine being on a small fishing boat with your friends, that's sort of indie, right? You're on the fishing boat, you're over there, let's fish over by the trees over there, and let's jump in, have a swim, and let's go ashore over here and have lunch, and let's sail off again this direction. Whereas being on the Blacklist, you're sort of on a cruise liner, and I'm in cabin 3 on the 3rd floor, and every now and then I get to go up on deck and have a look out, but the cruise liner is going with or without me, and it's a beautiful cruise. But boy, they're not going to notice if I'm not on board, right? So it's a little bit that kind of world. Network TV or whatever is not very collaborative. I wouldn't arrive on set with a million demands or questions. I would sort of stay focused, concentrated, don't lose confidence when there are 60 people looking at you right on the other side of the camera, and it's a rush for time. Whereas in India, I would expect to have a say in the script. I would expect to have a sit down with the director and talk about my character. That's what justifies making less money. That's what justifies having a rougher experience. So both have values, of course. India is just much more collaborative, so a little more rewarding as an artist. But of course, network TV pays the bills, and it's working with incredibly talented people. And then it raises the profile for an actor like me, which makes it easier for me to get more interesting roles in the indie world. So everything is very connected that way. Now, for me, it's just important to have a leg in both.
I think it's interesting. I mean, there's also, probably there's the food's better, doing it.
Well, no, I've had a lot of indie
Yeah.
filmmakers are very eager to take good care of their cast.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well, it's essential. Like,
yeah,
people you don't realize this, but if you're eating day old burritos for 2 weeks, like it's like,
yeah.
you're not gonna be very happy working on an indie
Well,
set.
yeah, those film sets, thankfully, I'm not a part of. I call them the pizza bagel sets, where it's bagels every morning and it's pizza for dinner every night. Those days are thankfully over. That's back in the student film days. The people I work with now have a little higher regard for their actors and definitely take good care of them.
You definitely need both. I mean, you definitely need both to make a living. You got to do your own work, and you also, you need to pay the bills. And which brings me to my next thing about you is that you are also, and I think Jeremiah mentioned this too. You're also a filmmaker. You're also a director and a writer.
Correct.
Does that ever kind of, I mean, I feel like in today's world, everybody wants you to be like one thing, and they feel like they want to, sort of square peg, square hole kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Have you found any resistance to that, or when you say, "Hey, I'm a writer," or "Hey, I've directed," or do they welcome that, or has that been like something you've been able to use to get yourself more work? Like, how's the
Right.
relationship? How do you sort of reconcile the two?
Right. Well, it's an excellent question, and I think the answer is a little bit of both of what you mentioned, because of course, one of the reasons I got into writing and directing in the first place is that as an actor, I'm always giving away my power to other people. I walk into a casting room and I'm doing my thing, and I walk out crossing my fingers that hopefully I book that role, right? Writing is the first step in taking some of the power back, taking some of that creative power back that I constantly give away to others. And then directing what I write is the ultimate power over my vision. So that is incredibly empowering. So once I realized that I was a good writer, it was just about leaning into that. And then I've honed my craft over the last 14, 15 years. And I think I'm a better writer now than I've ever been. I'm very pleased with where I'm at. As a filmmaker, it's basically about keeping that vision intact. I would love to direct all my own pieces. But I'm relatively inexperienced as a filmmaker. I've done sort of 3 short films, and I'm in the process of trying to get my feature underway. I have some good people helping me make that happen. So let's see if I can get my first feature filming this year. But other than that, I have met some difficulty being a sort of hybrid of these formats, mainly from representation standpoints. I have an acting manager and an agent, and many people, because I won the Screencraft Fellowship, the Cinestory Fellowship, have tried to get me writing representation. And that's been really tricky because a lot of managers or agents for writers are looking to send you out to pitch for shows. They would send you an IP, a book or something, and then say, well, this production company is looking for 5 writers to pitch what they would do with this book. That's not the work I'm looking for. I'm not looking to replace my acting career with a writing career. I'm looking to enhance my acting career with the writing I do and directing what I write. So that's been tough for representation to take on because they're looking to make money, of course. And so having someone come in saying, well, you're welcome to pitch my scripts, but I'm not looking to be hired in a room for a TV show, a writer's room, or I'm not looking to pitch for studios about your book that I'm asked to adapt. I write original screenplays, and unfortunately, in today's world, original screenplays are not as much in demand as they used to be. A lot of the stuff produced out there is based on intellectual property, which means adaptations, and that's just not what I'm interested in. So, and so that's the conundrum. So, to answer your question, I've experienced both sides of that coin.
I wouldn't call it a failing of the industry, but I think in many ways as creators too, we're kind of expected to be, like people look at me and they go, "Oh, you're the podcast guy." And it's like, I do all this other stuff too, and I think we kind of underestimate people in that way.
That's a very good point. And I see it in my in acting roles I'm being offered, right? And of course, it's an avenue you go down. So on the Blacklist, I'm a bad guy, and I've been cast as a bad guy in many things before. I'm a monster in Jeremiah's film. I've been in the Black Room in the Natasha Henstridge. I play a crazy person, and Art of the Dead with Tara Reid. I've been all kinds of bad guys. So once people see you as the bad guy, of course, well, they go, well, that's what he can do. But then enter from the left, people like Deborah Markovich, who knows me personally, privately, and she sees me as someone, a very normal guy in a couple of guys with a normal emotional life and is not out to kill people, and gives me a chance to act in a couple of guys, right? So the more people you know behind the scenes, the more your casting opens up, of course.
In terms of things that you have planned for the future, things that you want to do, I mean, what it seems like you're talking about is kind of maybe making your own independent films, and trying to get the word out that way, because you want to direct and write, but you also want to act in these things. Were these vehicles for you, or are you just kind of like, oh, you know what, I wrote this, I could probably play that part as well?
Well, I think in those cases, I mean, the short films I've done, I've also played the leads in. And honestly speaking, it's just one less thing to worry about. Creating a film production is so much work. There's so many spinning plates you're trying to get together. And knowing my own skill set and having written the scripts where I know exactly where my character is coming from and the tone that I'm looking for, that's not a problem. I'm not distracted by taking off my acting hat and putting on my director's hat on set. I'm very prepared for that. So to me, it's just a benefit that I know I'm able to do both. But I mean, of course, there are challenges you have to be aware of. The tendency is when you direct yourself to just rush through it and focus on everybody else. You're like, oh, I don't want to take time for people to think I'm all about me. But it's a matter of finding that balance and making sure you also get the best performance out of yourself, directing yourself. So it's mainly about taking control back of the vision that I have. You know, sometimes as an actor, you work with people where you sometimes go, oh, I would have done that slightly differently, right? That's when I started to realize I could write or I could direct, because I'd be on sets and be like, you know what, I would have put the camera over there. And I wonder why I'm even saying this, right? So sometimes you can bring that up for discussion and they can change the lines or whatever, but a lot of the times you can't. And so you end up being in productions where, strictly speaking, you're not entirely sure of what they're going to end up with, and how they edit it may not be the way you had it in mind either. So it's just about trying to be sort of loyal to what I feel is my sort of artistic integrity and do the best you can with that without being too, taking myself too seriously about it. A lot of the projects are just a lot of good fun working with fantastic creative people. And if the film turns out great, wonderful. And if it doesn't, well, we made a go at it.
You're not the first person to say that. A lot of people have said, I just wanted to keep the story intact. I just wanted to, and it's also one less part that you have to worry about casting and
Correct.
finding the right actor for, which is, that's hard. Like, people don't realize how hard it is to try to find the right person.
Absolutely.
And if you've written it yourself, you're directing it, and you go, okay, well, I got that covered too.
Yes.
The trick is to not, I think, do too much where you're spreading yourself too thin, and then things start to slip because, you're only one person and you only have so much time in the day, kind of thing.
That's absolutely right. But it's also, I mean, as speaking of spreading myself thin, I also sort of edit and I like to color correct my own stuff as well. If and when it was to happen that I'm, have directing 4 feature films at the same time, I have one lined up after the other, trust me, I will not be doing that. But for now, when I have the time and the luxury to take care of, up until this point, just short films, I absolutely want that control. I mean, I write with editing in mind. I write with a particular vision in mind. So I'm not sure why I would want to give that up to somebody else. I mean, that's part of it. Editing is a huge part of it. So so spreading yourself thin, definitely on a feature, you have to make some serious choices about what you're able to do, what you're not able to do. But the key is to surround yourself with a great crew that you know and trust, and then really do a lot of pre-pro, like really make sure you're absolutely prepared. I do little stick figure out, storyboarding for anything I do, just to be super prepared when I get to set. And then we can be flexible with the DP if he comes up with a different shot or thinks something isn't quite working. But I want to come to the table with a suggestion for sure. So we're not just trying to figure it out in the day. And I know a lot of people work differently. I think Jeremiah and Dominic Savili, one of the very talented DPs out there, they basically sort of figure out the shot once they get to the scene. They like that freshness of it and they figure it out together. I'm just not as confident as they are in my directing skills. So
yeah, I know. I mean, I've been on both ends of that coin, and it's tricky because especially when you have that especially when you start getting the big crew, you're like, oh, everybody's looking at me right now to make a decision.
Yeah, exactly.
So the other thing I'm going to wrap up shortly here, but
Sure.
do you have anything else you want to talk about in terms of upcoming projects, stuff you have coming out, stuff you
Well,
can talk about? Maybe I don't know what you have that
yeah,
you.
there are a few things I can't talk about, but I can talk about a few projects coming up. I just filmed a Western opposite Brandon Routh and directed by Miles Hassel, which is super cool. We filmed out in -degrees in the middle of Montana, super hardcore, but a ton of fun. That's going to be distributed this year at some point. I'm about to shoot a film which is a sequel to a successful sort of festival feature called Live Scream. The sequel is called Live Screamers, and we're going to film that in Charleston in April with a super talented young female director who I've had my eye on her for a long time. So look out for that later on this year as well. So yes, a lot of good projects happening currently. And then I'm trying, as I said, to get my own feature underway. So we are having meetings almost daily about that currently, and we'll see if we can make it bigger budget, which demands celebrity names. I'm not such a big fan of that, or keep it smaller, and then we can cast a bunch of unknowns that are very talented and just not worry so much about the bottom dollar.
Very cool. So for people who want to follow you, know more about you, possibly stalk you online, where can they find you?
Well, during COVID, I started doing reaction videos on YouTube, which is a weird side result of COVID. So I have a YouTube channel under my name, Lukas Hassel. Has about 34,000 followers at this point, which is great. A lot of fun we're having with that. I'm on Instagram, Lukas Hassel, with a K, one L in Hassel. I'm on Facebook. I have a page there and stuff. So, and Twitter. So I'll be out there. You can Google me, and you'll find all kinds of avenues of finding me.
That's great. Thank you so much for doing this. And if when you have stuff coming out, let us know.
I
And
will
if
do it for sure.
you have another project, come on back and talk about it.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, man. And that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more of our content, including our movie reviews, visit our website, norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And you can subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/getbehindtherabbit. I'd like to thank my guest, Lukas Hassel, and our sponsor, JMR Rentals. For Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.